All right, there we go. I'm gonna stand a little closer. Make sure. Yeah, it's for closed captioning. All right, I'm gonna sit in the audience with everybody too. All right, so Tracy, if you could just give us a little bit of a brief introduction about yourself, that'd
Sure.
be great.
So I actually have a psychology major, a bachelor's. I am working on my master's in organizational leadership and management. And the reason being, business is really involved. If you are being an after-school director and you're in charge of staff, so that's a little bit about that. I actually got into special ed because I have 3 sons, 2 of them on the autism spectrum, one nonverbal, and the other one high functioning or Asperger's. So with them growing up, I was hands-on in the classroom at their schools, and did actually some after-school programs with them as a volunteer. I came up here like 12 years ago, and I met Nicole at it was a conference for autism, and she was representing the Kids Like Me program there. And I came as a parent to listen to people talk about autism. And I initially was a TA at the school. Well, actually, no, initially I was a volunteer for Kids Like Me. And then I became a TA at the help group in 2nd through 4th grade classes. Got my CBEST so I could be a substitute teacher. And I was working at the after-school programs for Nicole and also helping out with the camp. And I guess it's probably now, how many years? There was a position at the Culver City help group campus that we wanted to really promote the after school and do the summer camp there. Nicole was based in Sherman Oaks, so that's what happened. So I think one of the hardest parts of doing camp was actually the hiring of staff. Yeah. And in a lot of cases, here we're dealing with children who have special needs. And sometimes these the staff actually had more special needs than the students. So there was a lot of me having to go hands-on and show the staff, so they could mirror appropriate behavior. And like I'm sure everybody sees here, you had to keep reminding them, get off the cell phone. We're reliable for these kids who a lot of times don't have any, there's no fear for certain, in certain instances, like they'll run across the street. Even if you tell them red means stop, green means go, yellow means go very slow. If they see something, they're impulsive. And if staff isn't paying attention, you don't want a tragedy on your hands there. So our programs, our after-school programs, we combined everybody, which I think is really important. In our camps, it was divided as per their abilities. And we're kind of leaning away more from that. We really want an inclusive environment, because these kids they need to learn from neurotypical peers. If they're stuck with other kids who don't speak, there's no incentive there. And as a parent, I know when I had my nonverbal son in the classes where he was isolated, there wasn't any improvement. So I did reach out and do extra through the Parks and Recreation had him join in with neurotypical kids. And he also, my youngest son, is neurotypical. And so that was helpful at home for him to have a good role model.
We're gonna open up for questions.
Yeah, why don't we do that?
All right, anyone have a question for Tracy?
What are the requirements to volunteer at the summer camp for the after-school program that you work at?
Good question.
Well, for the volunteers, we do interviews with everybody. In the organization, we were, before they were vetted through the human resource and the volunteer coordinator. We generally, I think the help group, it used to be they had 12 years old, and then it moved to, is it 18 or so,
We have
16?
some issues with younger children and, and also just, we definitely had quite a few, like Tracy was saying, young adults that had autism or something related to it that wanted to come volunteer, which has its own set of challenges, obviously. But they had a stringent requirement. We did a training for them, even if they had special needs or not. We did a volunteer training that I actually used to do for the whole agency and train folks to understand what we're trying to do. So right now it's 16 and up to volunteer at their programs and also for their schools too. But I think if they're doing school, it's 18. So for like the more recreational stuff, we said 16, and then it was 18 for school programs. But mostly that you were consistent and that you were able to do a big chunk of time is what we wanted. We wanted, that was the biggest thing, is consistency for the children, is to not have, different people every day, right? So that if you went to come and volunteer, then you'd be there for, every week in an after school program on Tuesdays, that's your day, great. Or you come for a whole summer, right? And you would come either a minimum of 5 days a week or 3 days a week, which is Monday, Wednesday, Friday, when we had 4 kids. So,
Yeah. And so with the volunteers, it's generally, they are more, have to be hands-off because of legal reasons. too,
yeah,
so.
you're not changing diapers, for example,
Right.
as a volunteer, yeah.
And yeah, there's a lot of diaper changing.
There's lots of diaper changing, it's fun time.
Yeah. it's-
Anyone else have a question for Tracy? Come on, guys, I know you have questions. Dig deep, please.
Does anybody in here have relatives with special needs or on the autism spectrum?
Yeah, my little nephew, he's on the spectrum.
How old is he?
He is 6.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if it's nonverbal. We don't really know if it's nonverbal yet. But yeah, it doesn't really talk, but he does use he doesn't use sentences, so we'll just use like one word.
Yeah, some language.
Some language, but
That's
they're hoping that it's gonna get better.
Well, and when I said I have one of my sons is nonverbal, he's functionally nonverbal. He didn't speak at 5. And I remember the professional psychologist saying he's not speaking now, he's never going to speak. He actually started speaking at 10. And so he will express his needs. I want Target toys, things like that.
Hey,
And then if he can't, he asks me for a pen and the paper, and he'll write things down that he wants. And he also will ask for my phone so he can type things out. So there's,
There's ways. I know sometimes my nephew will actually he's a really good artist,
mhm.
and he'll draw pictures of like what he wants or what he's trying to say through pictures, and they're actually really good drawings. I think he's a really good artist.
yeah, that's
Great.
awesome.
So
That's
that's
great.
his way of kind of communicating with us sometimes when we can't like.
Yeah.
But usually when he's like upset, he doesn't use his words, or when he's happy, he doesn't use his words either. He just like it's physical. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
Yeah, it's called Picture Exchange Communication Systems, or PECS. So we're like right sitting right right next to me, if I hand Greg an icon with a toilet on it, what do you think I need to go do? Go to the bathroom,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, so, but
Yeah.
stuff like that, right? So, but I hand it to him, I have a whole board that I choose from and can do that. And that also is supposed to help prompt language, right? Yeah, so with those drawings that he's already creating, which is awesome, use it. So there's a whole app called ProLoco, which is great. And it is essentially text, right? But it's on an iPad, so you can put a lot more, because like, if a kid is building repertoire and some language that way, it's easier to put it on an iPad. And also too, like me walking around with an iPad at 12 is kind of better than like a bunch of icons, right?
Yeah.
Too, like thinking about it socially.
Yeah.
So ProLocal is amazing.
What's it
So,
called?
ProLocal, I'll send it to you.
Thank you.
So, of course, it's a really cool program. It's expensive, but it's worth it.
Thank you.
So, and it's kind of like their voice
Yeah.
too. Like you can have an output and it'll say, Chrissy, I want cookie, please.
Oh,
The whole thing. It's really
yeah,
cool.
That would
So,
be great. actually.
yeah, we'll talk about it. It's
Yeah,
very
thank
cool.
you.
Yeah. Thank you. Anyone else have a person with special needs in their family?
Oh, no, I just-
Oh, okay, go for it. Let's do a question. Let's do that.
Is that? I don't want to cooperate.
It's,
I got it. I'll deal with it.
it is a challenge, but what I think is really important is to get to know what drives each kiddo that is in your after school or in your classroom, and so you can tailor things to make it more appealing. We did have a lot of students with behaviors, aggressive
Mhm.
behaviors, and yeah, you just, as I said, you really have to know each child. One problem that I think we ended up seeing was there was a lot of misdiagnoses of too many people were being diagnosed with autism because the parents could get a lot of funding. And so we ended up getting students who had more, defiant and
Emotional disturbance, or what it is quote unquote called is emotional disturbance. So more mental health diagnoses like oppositional defiant disorder. Sometimes we get kids with conduct disorder, which is really interesting. And just some pretty severe needs. So, and yes, they would be diagnosed with autism, but what I would see actually conversely, what Tracy was saying is the opposite. I would see kids with what I call the trifecta, which would be ADHD, oppositional defiant disorder, and a sensory integration disorder. And I'm like, you mean autism? Okay, because that's what that is, right? And then all these other diagnoses do not get you regional center services. So I would have to step in and say, hey, parent, let's get the right one. Let's get the right diagnosis so that your child can actually get some services through the state that you don't have to pay for. Right? So there's some of both, right? Where misdiagnosis both ways. But it's really important. I think we talked about this with Dr. Jamie when she was here during a neuropsych assessment and doing the ADOS. Remember we talked about this the other day? So the ADOS is ADOS, and it's for the autism test to figure out if the child does have autism, but it also teases out those other disorders as well. Okay. All right. Anyone else have a question?
What do you like? What are the kids mostly do in the after school programs? Like, is it a lot of one-on-one work, or is it like in groups, or?
well, we had a variety of after school programs. So one of the favorites was bowling after school. And we would generally have like by 10 kids, there would be 3 staff. And granted, yes, some children needed more one-on-one and hand, like helping them roll the ball or whatever. One of the biggest problems that we had, not only for the after school, but actually more for the camp, was having, again, back to staff, thinking this kid can't do anything, and they all can. So they wouldn't bring them to the art class, and they wouldn't let them partake in the cooking. And with all of these kids, there is a way they can participate. And that's what the parents are paying for too. So you just have to know the child. You do hand over hand with certain things, but you don't do their work for them either.
Yeah. And some of our kids, we would put volunteers as like a one-to-one with them, so that if the kid needed more support, a volunteer would be there as an extra set of eyes and hands with that child if they needed it too. But obviously, if they didn't have a lot of behavior issues, it was more that they just needed more other support. Any other questions?
If someone's like barely stepping into like the after school camp, would you recommend them volunteering at an after school program first or at a camp?
Well, I would say start off with maybe the after school programs and see, because camp, you really want them to make sure that they're going to be dedicated throughout the whole summer to be there. But I've had success with volunteers in both settings. So it just depends on the personality too of the volunteer and what they can handle, and to make sure that they're empathetic and kind and caring to the kids, and that they're not just there. We did have high schoolers come and to get this special volunteer hours, and with some of them it was just club. They were still like in high school talking to each other, and so that's where you kind of need to break them up so they can, it's not just it's not a club. So
Conversely, we had a club though. We had an autism club for kids at Harvard Westlake. So I had one volunteer, she created a club for volunteering with us. It was actually really cool. So what she's talking about is like more fraternizing, right? So again, there's good and bad, right? So, but that's what would happen if we had a bunch of like what we would call kids, right? They would all kind of congregate together instead of hanging out with the kids, right? So we want to spread them out and have them do different things. Did you have a question?
What are some of the challenges you face during
Mm.
COVID?
well, frankly, I haven't for the last 2 years, because my program ended right before COVID. So this would be with Nicole.
I can answer that one.
Yeah.
So, well, we did camp online. So I think I said this before, is I got tasked with doing an online program for kids with autism for our camps as well as our after school classes. So we had to really readjust. And I had a gaming club. So we'd be on Zoom and we'd have different breakout rooms where the kids are playing games interactively with each other. And a staff person is there to keep them socially appropriate and on task. So we would do that. But I also had a full-blown camp program, like a day camp online. I had kids from all over. I had some kids, I had a kid from Ghana, I had a kid that came on from Indonesia. He'd get on at midnight with us because there's no other program like ours at that point in time. So it was very weird on Zoom when they told me first, like, oh yeah, you're gonna do camp online. I said, what? How? So, but we made it work. I don't know how. My staff were amazing. That's the bottom line, is I had folks that really dug deep and were able to figure out how to do this and how to do it on Zoom and how to make it fun and interactive and engaging. So that was a big challenge, of course, but I think we were pretty darn successful. So we had 135 campers last summer, and I probably had 90 to 100 kids online every week too. So, it can be done. It's obviously not the preferred method of any camp or after school program, but we did what we had to do. So yeah, it was interesting though, that's for sure. All right, any more questions for Tracy? Who's got some questions? Yep.
What would you say is your greatest strength and weakness?
I'd say it was connecting with the kids, just because on my personal level with having sons with special needs, I I got it. And I also knew what the parents were looking for too. So dealing with the parents, I was also a strength of mine. And the biggest weakness is when I did have to tell staff to actually do their job, and tell them over and over again. Yeah, so that was my biggest weakness.
Other questions?
What's your like favorite or most rewarding part of your
Oh, that's easy. There's a number of times when you have this kid coming in to camp the very first day, they're like draped around their mom's or dad's leg and, crying and not wanting to go. And then the parents are, oh, can I come in with them? And you don't let that happen.
No.
So, but this one kiddo in particular, I mean, he was just fighting and screaming and crying for like 3 hours into camp. And at the end of the day, we had a ball pit room. And so you kind of eased him into all the different things. The next day, he came running in and he didn't want to go home, So, I mean, that's the moments like that where you see that you've actually made a difference to the kid and to their family too. So.
Let's say, did you have a question? Go for it.
My question is, what's your like your role model?
Oh, good question. Who is your role model, Tracy?
Nicole.
I thought you were going to say that.
Yeah, no, Nicole definitely taught me a lot more because I didn't go personally to camp as a kid. So that aspect of everything, I did after school programs and things like that, but also a couple of my son's first teachers, because I did volunteer as and was part of the parent association and all of that. And I was the room mom for a number of their classes. And when you saw these great teachers who really did care and made a difference, it helped direct me to teach and to interact with the kids the way I wanted my kids to be interacted with. So.
Another hand over here at some point. Anybody else have a question for Tracy? All right, tell us about your master's program. That's what I want them to hear about, because I think it's a really cool opportunity and something very different. So tell them about your master's program.
So I'm going through, it's Pacific Oaks College. It's, and that's what I've been doing during COVID. It's kind of been an ideal time for me to get it done. So I'm just working on my final applied research. And so within the next month, I'll be finished. But it is a master's in organizational leadership and management. And you learn everything from all data-driven decision-making, human resources, everything that's involved in running a business, because you do need to have knowledge in all fields. If you're going to start a business on your own, you need to know how everything runs in each department. So you can understand your staff, you know how to direct them, and just to, well, the other thing is if you don't get this type of a master's, you may be stuck always in like middle management. So if you want to move up in the world, it's good to understand every aspect of running a business.
Do you guys understand what middle management is? Can someone give me an example of what a middle manager would be? Yeah, great.
So like in my job, we have a lead, and then we have a supervisor.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, so there's gonna be direct care staff for folks that work directly with the clients or kids, mostly in our world. then there's gonna be a supervisor or manager, right? And then there's going to be a supervisor above them. So the middle is this middle manager, right? So Tracy and I were much more middle management. And usually when that happens, there's someone above you and then below you. And what happens with middle management is you get squeezed, right? And a lot of people don't like that squeezing because it's tough because you hear it from your people that are in the trenches every day. And then the executives that know nothing about what's going on and saying, no, you cannot give raises, like things like that, right? So it is tough. And people have to figure out what works for them and what's not going to. Before we kind of finish off, I do want to ask Tracy about what we've been working on together. So behind the scenes, Tracy and I have been working together still. And we're working on something for my nonprofit that I just started. It's called New Growth Inc. And what we're doing is creating, well, she'll tell you about it, is something called Camp Kelly. And we are going to be doing an inclusive camp program next summer. So Tracy, you want to tell them what you've been working on? A lot of different things about Camp Kelly. What have we been doing?
Well, we're trying to figure out how to get seed money
Yeah.
to start it, because running a camp, again, with the business, you need to have insurance, you need to be registered through the IRS, you need to be, we need to set up a website. And so I've been doing a lot of looking into how we can get funding. So through, I'm in the process of writing a grant proposal, basically a generic one that we can tweak for different organizations or foundations that offer the funding. What is difficult is most of these big organizations want to donate to companies that have got a track record. So usually at least 3 years in business. And so that's challenging. We're looking into GoFundMe pages or PayPal as well. And into, there's a lot of celebrities out there that also have special needs children, and see if we can get them involved to help start us out. We also, our camp is going to be inclusive. So siblings can be there. Anybody else can be there. And well, Nicole wanted to also start the sports.
Oh, yeah. So we're starting a sports program specifically catered to women. Because there's a lot of women that are trying to be more equitable among sports. A lot of soccer players, so like the women's soccer team is the best in the world and they get a portion of that. There was a meme the other day, side by side of Sue Bird. You know who Sue Bird is? She's like 5-time Olympian, maybe 6. She's amazing. Her pay next to LeBron's, right? She's the best in her craft in basketball, and LeBron is LeBron, right? We all know LeBron. She makes about $500,000, and his was like $43 million. To give you perspective, okay? So what our mission is to empower women, to do their sports. So we're gonna do the 3 major sports: basketball, softball, and soccer. Because if I take on, sorry, Tatum, we're not doing water polo, right? But maybe eventually, but we're gonna tackle those first and have those girls, yes, they're doing their craft and their sport, but what they're going to do is mentor the younger children at Camp Kelly and teach them how to do it. And we're gonna have them kind of mentor and work together. These girls are gonna probably be like 12 to 18. So when it gets really competitive, right? Like you do water polo, Tatum,
Yeah.
when did it become really competitive for you?
Like I started playing year round after middle school, so like 12.
Yeah, 12, 13, right? That's when it becomes kind of, and that's what I'm trying to strive for, is have girls like that are probably gonna go on to college and play their sport in college, and mentoring kiddos with special needs, as well as the other children that may not have special needs, but giving them a really cool camp experience. They're gonna be called Kelly's Captains. And what else are we doing? So we're also doing swimming. That's gonna be a big thing because many of my kids with special needs love the water, but they're not water safe. There's a big difference between loving water and being water safe. I've seen way too many times in the news, unfortunately, where a child with autism or something related drowns in a pool of water this deep. Okay, because no one taught them how to hold their breath. right? So that's a big thing. My old agency would not have it because they were too big. And I just got the quote for the insurance and I'm doing it. So, because there's such a huge part, like, if you ever went to a camp program as a kid, you went swimming, but you did, right? So that's gonna be a big thing, that we're doing as well. So Tracy is doing, or essentially her grad school project on Camp Kelly and on what we're doing. So, you know, she's doing a lot of bits and pieces of things that she's never done before, like grant writing, right? And doing things like that. So, it'll be interesting. So, but we'll have also what I call reverse inclusion, which I think is really cool, is hiring some folks with special needs, young adults that are also camp counselors. They're one-to-ones. They're ingrained in the program. And there's something called the Department of Rehab here in California. And they actually will pay these folks. I don't have to. The state will, because it's an internship for them. So it's a pretty cool thing. So lots of things, right? Lots of things going on. But, you know, and Tracy will probably, she doesn't know this yet, but I'm probably gonna hire on as my director for Camp Kelly to do a lot of what I talked about earlier, if she wants it, you know? So, but those kinds of things are what we're gonna be focusing on. There's a lot, right? There's a lot of different stuff there. I work with a lot of different professionals, as you guys have already seen in this class. And bringing those folks in to making a really quality program for kids. So that's what we're doing. Does anyone have any other questions for Tracy before? All right. Yeah, oh, yeah, I saw it. Yeah, do it. Go.
What type of data do you take as a
Ah.
camp director or at the school?
A lot.
Yeah, no, I constantly would have, well, back in the, like a notebooks in my pocket and constantly writing things down. You've got to, you have to be really meticulous about everything that's gone on throughout the day, because there are instances where we did have a police involvement with one of our kiddos, and this parent had taken the kid, I think it was like 5 days later after he went to camp. And she'd taken him to the police department and said he had all these bruises on him, and she blamed one of our staff. But we had meticulous notes. We also made sure that the staff didn't go alone with, you know, there were always other witnesses around there. So yeah, you are constantly taking data. If you're in a classroom and parents have the IEP, does everybody know what an IEP is? So it's an individualized educational plan. So if you're in special needs, the parents have a meeting with the teacher, with the principal, and usually a regional center person. And they go over, okay, these are the goals that we want our kid to accomplish this year. And in it, a lot of times there are certain behaviors, like if this child is hitting his head so many times a day, you know, you need to take data on that and see if it's reducing, or and also notice when it's happening, what are the circumstances that triggers some of these behaviors. So because at the end of the year, they're going to go look back at all of that data to see if you were doing the job that you're supposed to be doing. So yeah.
Anybody else before we let you guys go? Can you guys thank Tracy for coming in today?
You guys.
All right, and just a reminder that you need to do your 2 questions for Bridget, our gen ed teacher that I will be interviewing via Zoom. Okay, I'm interviewing her at 7 on tomorrow evening. So please put it up on Canvas before 6 p.m. Yeah? And you guys are free to go. Thank you guys for coming today. Thanks, Tracy. All right, Brianna, you can also go ahead and see you later.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I hope you're okay. Talk to you soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.